The Shōgen-ji temple is in central Japan. It belongs to the Rinzai school of Zen Buddhism and is a special center where Zen monks undergo training. The 8th day of the 12th lunar month sees the beginning of a week of intensive meditation and religious discourse. The week is called Rohatsu Ozeshin. On the evening before it begins, an atmosphere of tense determination fills the monastery. Rohatsu Ozeshin is associated with the enlightenment of Shakyamuni, the Buddha, after he saw the morning star on the 7th day of his seated meditation under the Bodhi tree. For the monks in training, it is the most important period of Zen practice and a climax in their monastic life, one which measures the effectiveness of the past 12 months of training. This, at last, is the Rohatsu Ozeshin you have all waited for. For 7 days, you will sit as if it were a single day. This training period is aptly called a monk killer, but I ask you all to put every possible effort into it and not to spare yourself in any way. Master and monks gather together in the dining hall and drink tea poured from the same container. This strengthens the sense of unity between them in their training, and they pledge to devote themselves totally to the meditations that will begin the next day. Rohatsu Ozeshin normally takes place at the beginning of December, but at the shōgen-ji it begins in accordance with the lunar calendar on the 15th of January, when the weather is at its hardest and coldest. It lasts for 7 days. It is now midnight on the 14th. In the meditation hall, the atmosphere has gradually become tenser. The monks lie down to sleep. Ozeshin will begin at 3 in the morning. They have time for only a short nap before then. Among the monks, there are several newcomers who are about to experience Rohatsu Ozeshin for the first time. Harumi Asayama is one. In April last year, when the cherry blossoms were beginning to fall, he came here to the shōgen-ji to undergo training. To become a Zen priest, one must enter a Zen monastery for the proper training. In other words, one must follow the training of an unsui. Harumi Asayama is the son of a Zen priest. Since childhood, he has intended to follow in his father's footsteps. But will he be able to accustom himself to the isolated monastic life, so well known for its strict discipline? He can't help but feel anxious. I have come with a request. What do you want? I'm from the shōgen-ji temple of Izumo City in Shimane. My name is Harumi Asayama. I'm the disciple of Keishu Asayama. I've come here to stay and receive training. Please take my request to the abbot. Please wait here a moment. His request to enter the monastery is in accordance with the traditional rules he has been taught. After a short while, the shikario, who is the chief monk or administrator of a Zen monastery, appears. The monastery is full. There is no room, so we cannot accept you. Please leave immediately. It is a polite but blunt refusal, with the explanation that the monastery is full and that therefore there is no room for him. But he must not be discouraged. Until he is granted permission to enter the monastery, he will remain sitting here. On the same day, the employees of a local company are at the monastery for a brief training course. The modest way of life and the training and concentration given here are looked on with favor today as things that are hard to come by in modern society. Brief courses of this nature have now become part of the annual calendar of events at the monastery. The figure of Asayama sitting perfectly still in the entrance hall, wearing his straw sandals, brings curious looks from the young visitors, about the same age as he is, as they pass. It began raining in the afternoon. Asayama's hands and feet have become numb, and his joints are hurting. But there is no word from inside the monastery. It has been a long day for him. In the evening, he is at last given a meal of leftovers and a room for the night. But this does not mean that he has been given permission to enter the monastery. He is told to leave early in the morning. He will therefore have to stay in the same posture all day tomorrow. Why is it that a cold refusal, even if only a formality, is given repeatedly and without exception to those who wish to take up Zen training? It is, in fact, a test to see how strongly the applicant is determined to embark on the program of training. The final goal of Zen, Satori, or enlightenment, is not something that can be learnt from another. It can only be attained by the seeker himself. The key to the path to enlightenment is the strength of the seeker's motivation and his single-minded determination. On the 5th day, Asayama is given permission to enter the monastery and begin training. He has spent 2 days in supplication, during which time he kept up his posture of low bowing, and passed through a 3-day test period of provisional admission. About 2 weeks later, together with 2 other novices who were granted admission at the same time, Asayama goes to exchange greetings with his Zen master. Their relationship is now that of master and disciple. A Roshi, or Zen master, is one who has attained the same level of Satori as Shakyamuni. A Zen disciple acts towards his master in the same way as when he worships Buddha. The 3 newcomers, having been given permission to enter the monastery, make a vow not to leave it until they have found Satori. The introduction of the 3 to the meditation hall is accomplished by a single phrase, which means new trainees have joined. No names are mentioned, nor anything about the trainees. There are about 30 unsui in this monastery, including some who have been here for almost 10 years, some who have come from other monasteries, family men, and men from the world of commerce. Their backgrounds are many and varied, but in Zen, in which everything is relative to that single moment each person seeks, the past and the outside world are of no importance. The meditation hall is described by words on the wall outside it, the Senbutsujo, the place where those capable of reaching Satori and becoming Buddhas are made. It is a holy place that does not easily allow laymen to approach. A single tatami mat, 3.5 feet wide and 7 feet long, is assigned to each monk. This is where he sleeps and where he performs his seated meditation. Traditional Japanese Zen Buddhism is divided into 3 schools: the Soto, Rinzai, and Obaku. The Rinzai school has 39 special centers in different parts of Japan. The shōgen-ji is one of these. In Zen Buddhism, a monastery is likened to a grove of trees. Trees in a grove will grow straight and submissively, even though competing with one another. But trees growing in isolation extend their branches self-indulgently. Monks in training are the same. It is paramount that they have a clean environment, good company, and a strict master. At 3 in the morning on the 15th of January, Rohatsu Ozeshin begins with the ringing of the morning bell. From this moment until dawn, 7 days later, the monks will make an intense effort with neither sleep nor rest, as if the entire week were but a single day. There is still some time before daybreak. The cold is piercing. With a single pinch of salt and a ladle full of water, the monks rinse their mouths and wash their faces. He finishes his preparations and dons his robe. Everything is done in haste. In the monastery, time is precious. The unsui have to reach Satori as soon as possible. They must not waste a single moment. At about the same time as the unsui are getting up in the meditation hall, there is one corner of the monastery where the lights are already on and work is in full swing, the kitchen, where meals for the whole monastery are prepared. Normally 2 monks share the duties here, but during Ozeshin, all the work is entrusted to just 1 monk. The morning rice gruel is cooked in a large iron cauldron, as it has always been. The fuel is firewood gathered on the hillsides by the unsui. The rice and vegetables collected by the monks during their begging, no matter how little, must never be wasted. Kitchen duties are looked upon as the most suitable of all the tasks in a monastery for the monk's training. The cook takes charge of the provisions and thus the health of his fellow monks, and the work demands unobtrusive service and heavy labor. Dogen, the 13th century founder of the great Eheji monastery of the Soto school, crossed to China to study Zen, and while there, is said to have experienced sudden satori through the speech and activities of an elderly cook. This episode is a good illustration of the inner workings of Zen training and the importance of the cook, for without labor and ingenuity in the use of everyday routines and experience, there is no satori. After morning seated meditation and a visit to the Zen master for instruction, breakfast is served at 5 o'clock before it is light. The monks take turns waiting upon each other. The quantity of food served is determined by hand signals, which indicate when a monk feels he has received enough. Before the meal, the monks chant a scripture to give thanks for the food, which has come to them through the charity of others. With each meal, they rededicate themselves to the search for truth. A few grains of rice are put to one side as an offering to hungry spirits. The meals in the monastery are very simple. Today's breakfast consists of rice gruel with rice cakes left over from the new year and a few pieces of pickled radish. The dining room is another important place for training. It is one of the 3 halls of silence, the others being the meditation hall, where zazen, seated meditation, is done, and the bathhouse. Even whispering is forbidden. Manners demand that no noise should be made while handling the dishes, while eating the gruel, or when biting the pickles. Until one is accustomed to this, it is not always easy. Every last drop of water must be used. This is the spirit of the Zen monastery. The monks use their tea to wash their bowls and then drink it. During Ozeshin, routine activities such as manual labor and begging are brought to a halt, and the unsui concentrate only on meditation, day and night. Zazen is a way of meditation handed down over the centuries from India. It is a systematic way of searching for satori by unifying body and mind through control of one's breathing. The correct manner of sitting erect is adopted. The body forms a pyramid, with the head as the apex and the legs crossed to form part of the base. Next, the breathing is regulated. Breathing normally tends to be short and shallow. For Zazen, it must be longer and deeper. If this is done correctly, the body will not feel cold even in the middle of winter. Lastly, the mind must be controlled. All rambling thoughts and worldly desires are put away. The object is to attain a state of detachment. In other words, satori. At intervals between periods of zazen, kinhin, meditation while walking, is performed. The monks walk around the meditation hall rapidly. This light physical exercise enables them to relax their stiff bodies and drives away drowsiness. It is, in a manner of speaking, moving zazen. It artfully combines movement and stillness. Ozeshin is described as deadly, difficult, but it never forces irrational penance on the monks or austerities that ignore the limits of the human body. The midday meal is taken at 10:30 a.m. and consists of rice, miso soup, and a side dish. The evening meal consists of gruel made from leftover rice and vegetables. No animal products are ever consumed. San-zen, meeting the Zen master, takes place 4 times a day between 4 and 9. It is one of the 2 principal activities during intense training, the other being zazen, seated meditation. The master gives each monk a koan, which is a problem to be solved. One by one, the monks enter the master's room and recite their answers. The master considers each one. If the master sees that a monk is straying from the correct path in his training, he corrects his efforts. Truth in Zen can only be communicated directly from the mind of the master to that of his disciple. Third persons are strictly excluded from this room. Here, 2 minds meet in intense confrontation, and the outcome of the interview is unpredictable. The clash of minds is in earnest. The words exchanged between master and disciple regarding any particular koan are strictly a private matter between the 2. No one else is ever told what has been said. When the master rings the bell, it is a sign of an unsatisfactory answer. The monk must withdraw and come again. Zen teaches that Buddha is inside the mind of each of us, not outside. The goal of Zen training is to bring the trainee face to face with his true self, the Buddha within. We have all lost sight of our true selves, misled by the multitude of apparent choices and deceptions of the perceived world. Does a dog possess the Buddha nature? Listen to the sound of one hand clapping. Riddles posed by koan are unanswerable according to the rules of common sense. The monks in training wrestle with them assiduously. But as long as they continue to think in the patterns of ordinary thoughts, they will fail the challenge of their Zen master. They are thus driven into a corner. Failing to satisfy the master again and again, they come at last to understand the futility of the everyday world's logic and knowledge. Thus they are able to see beneath and beyond appearance, and in time find their true selves. That will be Satori. A koan. Have you heard the sound of one hand clapping from the front or from the back? This use of koan as an effective means of education was systematized by the Japanese Zen priest Hakuin in the 18th century. Employing koan is the outstanding characteristic of Rinzai Zen. Soto Zen, on the other hand, teaches the use of zazen alone. In the meditation hall, zazen continues after dark. The unsui, taxing their ingenuity to solve the koan they have been given by trying to become the koan, find themselves seized by an almost irresistible urge to sleep. A change in their manner of sitting will betray any wandering of the mind or any impatience. Immediately they will feel the warning stick on their shoulders. Wielding this is the responsibility of the monk in charge of the meditation hall, the jikijitsu. The warning stick is never used for intimidation. It is the stick of compassion, used to rouse the trainee's spirit, and acts in place of the bodhisattva Manjusri, the bodhisattva of enlightenment and master of the meditation hall. The warning stick is used first to drive away sleepiness, then to relax stiffened muscles, and finally to correct the sitting posture. It is, in fact, a symbol of the monastic life, which from beginning to end follows strict rules of etiquette. During Ozeshin, in addition to the 3 meals that are eaten, the participants are given something to drink 4 times a day. Although the food in a monastery is the minimum needed by the human body and frugal in style, meals are nutritional and timed to conform to the rhythms of the trainees' bodies and minds. At 11 o'clock at night, when the outside world seems to have frozen, a drink of sweet rice wine is warming and delicious. monk who takes charge of such services is known as the Jisharyo. The word means someone offering services to the Bodhisattva Manjusri, the symbol of wisdom and enlightenment. This responsibility belongs to a senior monk. All those who are undergoing training, confined in the meditation hall with Manjusri, are bodhisattvas, even the lowest ranked unsui, and are served just as Manjusri would be. As its nickname, Unsui Killer, suggests, Ozeshin is a severe form of training, with harsh, very harsh, discipline. But on the other hand, the trainee is treated with respect and watchful protection. It is an excellent system of education, reminiscent of both a strict father and a loving mother. Midnight. The lights are extinguished and the meditation hall enters a brief moment of rest. But for the monks training to reach Satori and who must consider 7 days as a single day, lying down is forbidden. They sleep as they are, seated. This is known as zasui. Zen is a branch of Buddhism that developed in China. This temple, the Nanka-ji Temple, stands in the suburbs of Xingquan, a city in southern China. The temple is a holy place connected with Huineng, the sixth and last of the famous patriarchs of Chinese Zen, who lived between the 5th and 8th centuries. There are always visitors in the grounds. Huineng was born in a nearby farming village in 638 AD, at the beginning of the Tang period. His family was poor, and he sold firewood for a living. He is said to have had no education. He attained spiritual enlightenment while turning a millstone with his feet. He was then still a layman in a monastery under the 5th patriarch, Hung Zhen. It was Huineng who laid the principal foundations of Zen. Zen was taken to China in the 6th century by the Indian monk Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma is an almost legendary figure. and few details of his life are known. There were, however, conspicuous differences between his teachings and those of other forms of Buddhism. Leap directly into the world of Buddha's enlightenment. Awaken to the true self hidden in the recesses of your mind. Teachings like these were well received by the Chinese, who tended to take a practical view of life and people and to accept them as they were. Chinese Zen searched for the way to truth in everyday life, without complicated learning or a series of closely constructed regulations. During the Tang period, from the 7th to the 10th centuries, and the Sung period, from the 10th to the 13th centuries, China saw a succession of great Zen masters who attained the same enlightenment as Shakyamuni. Monks of later generations began to search for hints in the experiences of enlightenment and the words and actions of the great masters that would help them in their own training. The collections they made became the origins of the koan. At the Nanka-ji temple, there are 7 priests and about 30 students studying under a master with 40 years of experience in Zen practice. The text for today's lecture is the Platform Sutra of the 6th Patriarch. Chinese Zen later changed, but it lives on here at the Nanka-ji temple. Japanese Zen faithfully adopted the monastic style of life developed in China, further refined it and polished it, and perfected a specific style of training. One of the major activities of normal monastic life is religious mendicancy, or takuhatsu, that is, begging. Shakyamuni strictly forbade monks to engage in productive activity. Takuhatsu is a traditional practice of begging that follows the teachings of Shakyamuni. Of begging, it is said, "You may ignore a whole village, but don't ignore a single house." In other words, every house must be visited, with no distinction made between rich and poor. And the mendicant should not mind if he is given nothing. When he is given something, he should accept it politely and press his palms together in the attitude of prayer and gratitude. Monks in training must bear in mind that they live on the charity of others, and they must give them the pleasure of giving. To this end, they must abandon selfish ideas and become beggars. That is takuhatsu. There are quite a number of stories of monks whose experiences while begging gave them the insight to solve a koan, and thus to move towards satori. At the Shōgen-ji monastery, rice is planted at the beginning of summer each year. The rice grown by the monks is harvested in the autumn and becomes the rice for the cakes eaten at the new year. No work for a day, no food for a day. The spirit of Chinese Zen is still very much alive in Japanese monasteries. Manual labor is not only a means of supporting one's daily life, it is also an effective aid to reaching enlightenment. In Rinzai Zen in particular, finding enlightenment through labor is placed above finding enlightenment through the seated contemplation of Zazen. Ozeshin has continued for 7 days and is now drawing to an end. The Unsui are almost in a hurry to visit the master's room for interviews. But their struggles with the koan have not gone very well. The senior monks see this and try to send them back to avoid wasting time on pointless meetings with the master. For the Unsui, however, the interview is of vital importance, and they are in no mood to withdraw. They are driven into a mental corner from which advance or retreat seems impossible. Yet they persist. Not even the senior monks can dampen their zeal. What is the satori one obtains through the koan? How is it achieved? There are many examples and stories about the masters of former times, but when all is said and done, these were the experiences of different individuals and occurred once and no more. They are not things that can be copied by others. Just as the locust sheds its skin, so the Unsui must break out of their shells by their own efforts. The master can only watch over them and wait. Early dawn of the 8th day. Possession is completed. How many monks were able to find Satori through this period of possession? Satori is said to be the encounter with one's true self, but it is in no way a special or mysterious experience. No man becomes in an instant a totally different person or discovers superhuman abilities that others lack. The Satori that Zen brings is sought because it offers a glimpse of one's own mind in a state of complete detachment. It brings that calmness of being that makes no distinction between the self and others, and so permits the practice of love and compassion for all living things. It is March. For the first time since he entered the monastery, Asayama has been given permission to return home for several days. This is his first return to the outside world for a year. What did he gain from the rigors of Ozeshin? Did he, in his 1 year of training in the monastery, experience anything worthy of being called Satori? How far did he progress with the koan? This is something no one can tell. At any rate, he has decided to stay at the monastery and make a determined effort to tackle the challenge of Zen training. It is now April. Once again, the season of blossoms has come to the countryside about the Shōgen-ji Zen temple. and once again the young people arrive in search of Satori. I have come with a request. What do you want? Higuchi was the name of a popular pleasure quarter that formerly stood on the lower reaches of the Yodo River, near present-day Osaka. In the dusk of an autumn day, a traveling monk arrives in town. A woman appears before him. This is the beginning of the No play, Higuchi. The woman begins reciting poems exchanged between a poet-priest and a woman of the pleasure quarter whom he asked for a night's lodgings, only to be refused. The events took place in the 12th century. The play was written in the 14th. There are many features of No theater that had their origins in the Zen monastery. For example, the structure of the No stage, the musical instruments, like the drums and hand drums, the forms of gesture, and the tempo. The Muromachi period, from the 14th to the 16th centuries, was the time when No drama developed. This was a time when Zen flourished in Japan. From its very start, No was strongly under the influences of Zen. The objective of No is the expression of beauty called yugen, or profound subtlety. Yugen is beauty produced by inference and lingering echoes of an unarticulated, endless inner richness. The beauty of the nothingness, or void, that Zen teaches. No is a stage art that gives shape to the mind of Zen. This is Kyoto, crowded with people out for the Gion Festival. But turn off the main roads into the back streets, and you find a traditional way of life that is the way it was many generations ago. The inside and the outside of the house are swept, water is sprinkled at the entrance, everything is kept clean. Nature's changes through the seasons are expressed in a small garden. The rooms are simple and practical. Nothing here is unnecessary. Even casual manners show the importance of etiquette. Seek the origins of this way of life, and you will come to Zen. Over the centuries, Zen has taken deep root, not only in religion and the arts, but also in the everyday life of the people. At about the same time that Western Europe was experiencing the high Middle Ages, in the middle of the 13th century, the Tofuku-ji temple was erected in Kyoto. Other temples built at the same time included the Kencho-ji in Kamakura and the Ehe-ji near Fukui City. Just as the European Middle Ages were inextricably linked to Christianity, so was Japan's medieval age inseparably linked to Buddhism, and particularly Zen. The history of China from the 6th to the 15th centuries, and that of Japan from the 13th to the 17th, cover a period of 1,200 years, which cannot be discussed without taking note of Zen. This period more or less corresponds to the whole of the Middle Ages of Europe. By strange coincidence, the West and the East entered an age of religious culture at the same time. Another form of art, like no representative of Japan's Middle Ages, is the tea ceremony, or the way of tea. The tea ceremony developed out of the tea-drinking etiquette in the meditation hall of the Zen monastery. Tea wakes and soothes both mind and body without intoxicating them. Tea is a symbol of Zen. In a part of the ground of the Daito-kuji temple in Kyoto is the Shinju-an, a sub-temple. The Shinju-an was founded by Ikkyu, the famous Zen priest. It is a fitting place to recall what he left behind and the climate of the Zen culture that flourished about him. Many anecdotes are told of Ikkyu. Most of them originated long after his death, but they are nevertheless appropriate. Ikkyu was a very free spirit and had a sharp sense of satire. He is said to have been given a document certifying his enlightenment by the Zen master who taught him, but he refused to accept it. He later burnt it in front of witnesses. The important thing for him was the practice of his enlightenment, not a piece of paper to prove it. Ikkyu was probably the freest mind Japanese Zen produced. He lived during the Muromachi period, a turbulent time in Japan's history. There was a succession of wars, and those in positions of authority or power were continually being ousted and replaced by their followers. But it was also a time of greater intellectual freedom than any other in the history of Japan. Ikkyu attracted the foremost creative minds to his circle. No writers and actors, painters, poets, the originator of the tea ceremony. These were the builders of Japan's medieval culture. The connection between Ikkyu and Juko, the founder of the tea ceremony, began here. Juko, by studying the practice of Zen under Ikkyu, came into contact with the Zen essence, which sees Buddhism in the routines of everyday life. This led him to formulate a new tea ceremony, a way of tea. Tea was to be drunk in a simple rustic hut, without any of the gaudiness of the tea ceremony followed by the fashionable people of the time. Beauty was to be found in wabi, a taste for simplicity and quiet. And the goal of the ceremonial drinking of tea was to become master of one's own mind. Its object was, in other words, the awakening of the realization that the hidden principles of tea and Zen were one and the same. Sen no Rikyu perfected the ceremony. Rikyu said that the purpose of the tea ceremony was to make the tea room a pure and immaculate Buddha land. The host makes the tea and serves his guests. Probably the only sound to be heard is that of the simmering water in the kettle or the wind outside. Through the agency of a bowl of tea, the barrier between host and guests disappears. Both the host who prepares the tea and the guest who watches become one with the wind that sweeps the sky and are filled with profound peace and serenity in the dimly lit space of the small tea room, a mere 6 by 9 feet. This feeling expands into the universe to produce an effect that resembles the satori in Zen, which negates the self. The tea room. Various ways of presenting beauty were designed in order to create a Buddha land on this earth. Space was reduced to a minimum from 4.5 tatami mats, or 9 feet square, to 2 mats, or 6 feet square. The light was dimmed to turn the mind inward. The design was made as simple as possible, and the room was given that silence which makes the sound of simmering water conspicuous. The spirit of Zen shows itself here in the form of the tea room. The Church of Sainte-Chapelle in Paris. In the clear story, one is enveloped in the radiance of light. Its stained glass windows fill the walls, and seen from below, the arched ceiling strengthens the impression of height. Those who worship here feel they are kneeling on God's ground. A church in the Gothic style and a tea room, the results of efforts made in both East and West to transform religious impulses into the creation of beauty at about the same time in history left two conspicuously contrasting worlds. Zen is a religion of beautiful form. Zazen, or seated meditation, is the basis of Zen training. Uncertainty and difficulty show themselves in one's posture during Zazen. Beauty in posture is proof of how deeply one has advanced in Zen training. In Zen monastic life, simplicity, cleanliness, and form are highly valued. Before going out to practice takuhatsu, or religious begging, the monks check each other's dress. And when they walk along a road, they form a neat line and walk at a fixed pace. Their clean robes and leggings are simple, but have the beauty of things that have seen long service. Zen is in no way an abstract religion separated from structure. Because of its intense spirituality, it attaches great importance to maintaining the beauty of forms and keeping the environment pure. Zen is thus a religion capable of producing specific creative arts about itself. Among those who gathered around Ikkyu were a number of artists. Jasoku, for example, repeatedly practiced zazen under the instruction of Ikkyu and sympathized with his unyielding spirit. It was from relationships like this that Zen arts attained new heights. Jasoku also left a number of paintings on the sliding partitions of the Shinjuan. Landscape. Here there is no objective drawing of what is seen, but the impact of the artist's state of mind. An unprejudiced and absolutely free brush expresses at one stroke the subconscious rather than the conscious. These are the best expressions of the spirituality that Zen possesses. This type of painting, which uses India ink, developed in China together with Zen. In China, it has been said since ancient times that black ink has 5 colors. In other words, the variety of shades that can be produced with it is limitless. These paintings are produced after the artist has developed a full knowledge of color. The paintings leave bold blank spaces, but what is a blank space? It corresponds to the Zen phrase, no dependence on the written word. One chooses silence before truth, which cannot be expressed in words. The black of India ink is a color that transcends color, and something which cannot be depicted with this black is left as a blank space. Zen teaches that Buddha exists within our minds and not outside us. Zen does not, therefore, set up a transcendental God or Buddha above human beings. The goal of Zen training, in short, is to discover one's original self within oneself. We have lost sight of our true selves as a result of desires and worldly distractions. Zen trainees constantly aim at liberation from such judgments and desires by dint of steady effort. A Buddha is one who reaches the awareness of the true self, attains satori, in other words, as a result of his efforts. In Zen painting, preference is given to realistic human figures suggestive of the state of satori, or landscapes imminent with opportunities of stimulating satori. The number of paintings brought to Japan from China have been highly valued since the Muromachi period as models of Zen art. These paintings were not necessarily considered orthodox in China, the home of the paintings, nor very much admired there, as the style was too free and unconventional, and the pictures were boldly subjective. To find the spiritual working of Zen in these paintings, and to be able to transmit that to society in general, can be said to show a new sense of beauty by Japanese Zen culture. This is the work of a Japanese Zen priest in the late Edo period, which lasted from the beginning of the 17th to the latter half of the 19th centuries. The animals seem detached, and there is an implicit power in the bamboo grove. Zen has influenced a number of art forms, such as the No dramas, the martial arts like Kendo, Judo, and Kyudo, the tea ceremony, flower arrangement, Japanese dance, and Japanese music. But the Zen influence has not been on their forms alone, for Zen has also created the foundation for the transmission of their traditions and systems of education. The secret of all the arts lies in negating the self, rising above the self to become completely at one with what one is doing. To reach that stage, there is only one way: hard and steady training. The master cannot teach the disciple the mysteries of the art, the essential and personal skills, as it were. The master can only recognize that his disciple has succeeded when he sees that he has achieved success by dint of his own effort and ingenuity. These arts are transmitted much as in Zen training. Satori in Zen is experienced as an extremely personal event. It is not something the master can teach. The master can only indicate the way, and after that must simply wait for the disciple to attain Satori by his own efforts. It is said that writing reveals the individual. There is a tradition by which a Zen priest expresses his experience of Satori, or state of mind, through calligraphy. This is called bokuseki, and has produced a specific kind of beauty in the form of writing. Hojo, two characters written on a framed wooden signboard preserved at the Tofukuji Temple in Kyoto. It was presented to the founder of the temple in the 13th century by his master in China. It has since served as a model for such writing on signboards done in other monasteries and is an outstanding example of handwriting. These written notice boards identify the geographical locations of Zen monasteries, their parts, and the titles of their officials, but they are not just practical in purpose. Putting up such excellent samples of handwriting serves to build a proper environment for training and to awaken a sense of religious tradition. To read and know the truth. This was displayed by a most revered priest and founder of the Daitokuji in the 14th century, before an event was to be observed in the monastery. This was also originally an item of practical use, but can serve as an object to assist religious devotion as it conveys the writer's ability. Ikkyu, a follower of the teachings of Daito, is said to have kept it always with him, hanging from his neck, even during his flight from the dangers of war. The satori found through Zen must be expressed and transmitted to others. To this end, Zen monks have used writing. Many excellent examples of writing on Zen themes were brought into Japan from China, the country that gave Zen to Japan. Ryosho was written by a Chinese Zen master, whom Ikkyu considered his own master. Ryosho means to rise to the sky and transcend the secular world. Zen priests write poems on their deathbed, summarizing their Zen. Such a poem is called yuige. Ikkyu's yuige went, in brief, like this. Who in the world could understand my Zen? I am the only one who can understand my mind. Even if Shu Tang, whom I've always respected as my master, were to come here, it would not be worth a penny. This was also written by Ikkyu, to refrain from all evil, to achieve the good. This summarizes all that the Buddha taught during his life, and which has been handed down through the centuries by believers. But Zen writings are not merely works of art to be admired or prized. Through them, those who follow the way can come closer to their predecessors, feel their spiritual power, and achieve their attainments and accomplishments. This was written by Hakuin, the restorer of Rinzai Zen in Japan in the 18th century. To be absent for a while is the same as being dead. Muga, or self-effacement, was written by Kitaro Nishida, who was one of Japan's leading modern philosophers and a practitioner of Zen. At this stage, Zen expression resembles Western abstract painting of today, but the intrinsic qualities of these two art forms are totally different. Western abstract painting destroys the established order in a search for a truer order. The artists try to discover this and express it. On the other hand, Zen paintings look in the opposite direction. They depict enlightenment, which has no shape to begin with, but which appears, forming itself into a shape. This is the Church of St. Elizabeth in Marburg, West Germany. It was built in the latter half of the 13th century and is one of the oldest and most purely Gothic-style churches in West Germany. In one corner of the church lie a group of sarcophagi. They are the tombs of feudal lords of that time. Here we find art centered on the human being, which persistently gives man a definite form. By contrast, Zen is a religion which aims, more than anything else, at liberation from any attachment to oneself possessing form. The rock garden of the Ryo-an-ji Temple in Kyoto is the ultimate expression of breaking away from one's form-possessing self to forms without self. In other words, perfect selflessness. The garden itself is not very large. It is a simple rectangle, and within it 5 groups of rocks have been placed. A philosopher of the school of Nishida, and also a practitioner of Zen, said, "I find infinite tranquility and limitless depth in this garden. The rocks are Mu itself." Mu means void, but not void as simply nothing, but absolute freedom from everything that has form. Six persimmons depicted with black ink. The philosopher finds that they have something in common with the rocks in the temple garden. He said that true Buddhahood without form appears spontaneously here, and that this picture of persimmons is a Buddhist painting that rises above Buddhist painting. There is a sense here of making contact with the invisible, of knowing oneself without being a slave to form. Zen culture, in other words. This is the latter half of the No play, Eguchi. The intention of the woman who refused Saigyo a night's lodging was to admonish him not to cling to the things of this life, for this world is but a passing stage. The woman who spoke to him was in fact the spirit of the deceased woman of the pleasure quarter. True art is not readily expressed in words, but let us enumerate the characteristics of beauty on which Zen art relies. There are 7 elements. Asymmetry, not adhering to perfection or punctiliousness. It does not mean staying imperfect until perfection is reached, but purposely breaking away from formed perfection. Non-attachment, to be open-minded and detached. This is freedom because being without any form is of every form. Naturalness, that which is artless in its natural form without pretense. Simplicity, neither complicated nor gaudy, artless, simple beauty. Silence, limitless silence, the inward-looking mind. Wizened austerity. Wizened, solitary, and stern, dignified, like an old tree. Profound subtlety, a lingering memory hidden deep inside, limitless implication. The dancing spirit of the woman of the pleasure quarter, saying that this world is merely a place of passage, yet also pleasant if one finds enlightenment, disappears into the hazy light of the western sky, becoming the Bodhisattva Samantabhadra. The No play Eguchi teaches us that the possibility of satori, or enlightenment, lies in realizing the transience of life and knowing maya, or illusion, to be illusion. And it states that the woman who realized this was a bodhisattva. That is the mind which has reached the stage where matter is void. Void is matter. Zen is a religion that searches for Satori, enlightenment. And Satori speaks to us in various forms of beauty today, too. It is indeed a religion that can produce beauty and become beauty.